We've all seen them. Those child prodigies, the natural-born geniuses who just seem to operate on a whole different level. And we look at them and think, wow, they were just born with it. But what if that's only half the story? Or maybe not the real story at all? Okay, let's get into it. Listen to Michelangelo himself, one of the greatest artists in history. This quote kind of makes you stop and think, right? It suggests that what looks like some kind of magic talent might actually be mastery that was forged through an incredible amount of work that most of the time we never get to see.
So this is the big question we're going to tackle. Is being incredible at something just a roll of the genetic dice, or is it something that's built, brick by painful brick, over thousands of hours? Let's find out.
All right, to really get to the bottom of this, we have to start with the ultimate poster child for innate genius, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. The guy was composing music at 5 years old, performing for kings and queens at 8. He is the prime example of the born with it theory.
And this brings us to a concept called the iceberg illusion. It's a perfect way to think about it. We see the stunning success, the tip of the iceberg that's sticking out of the water. What we don't see is the massive, hidden foundation of struggle and relentless practice underneath. With Mozart, all we see is the 5-year-old composer, and it just seems impossible.
So let's take a look beneath the surface. It's time to pull back the curtain on the Mozart myth and find out what was really happening.
You might be thinking, okay, sure, but a guy like Mozart has to be the exception, right? Someone who just showed up in the world pre-stamped with greatness. Well, the real story is way more interesting and honestly, a lot more useful for the rest of us.
See, here's where the context changes absolutely everything. Mozart wasn't just some random kid. His father, Leopold, was a well-known composer and one of Europe's leading music teachers. He put his son into an intense, super rigorous training program at the age of 3. This wasn't just a weekend hobby. It was an all-consuming, expert-led education, right from the very beginning.
And this number says it all. 3,500 hours. Just let that sink in for a second. By the time most of us were learning to tie our shoes, Mozart had already put in a mind-boggling amount of practice with an expert teacher living in his house. Yeah, he seems like a miracle compared to other 6-year-olds, but if you compare him to anyone else who's had 3,500 hours of expert practice, suddenly he doesn't seem like such an alien anymore.
And this timeline really lays it all out. His first piece that music historians agree is a true world-class masterpiece, he wrote it when he was 21. 21! Now, don't get me wrong, that is incredibly young, for sure, but it came after 18 years of non-stop, dedicated, expert-led training. The takeaway here is huge. Even for Mozart, mastery wasn't a gift, it was earned. Now, Mozart's story is a huge piece of the puzzle, but it's still just one person. What does the science have to say about all this? Well, that brings us to a really famous study that tried to pin down this X factor for talent once and for all.
So back in the early 90s, a psychologist named Anders Ericsson went to a top music academy in Berlin. He was determined to figure out what separated the good musicians from the truly great, world-class ones. He was literally hunting for the secret ingredient we call talent.
So he split the violin students into 3 groups. The ones who would likely become music teachers, the good performers headed for top orchestras, and the best of the best, the elite soloists. And what he found was, honestly, it was stunning. There was a direct, almost perfect straight-line relationship between their skill level and how many hours they had practiced by the time they turned 20.
But here's the real kicker. Ericsson didn't find any naturals, musicians who just floated to the top with less practice than everyone else. And he didn't find any grinders either, people who worked their tails off but just didn't have it. The single thing that separated the groups was the sheer number of hours they put in. Practice wasn't just part of the story, it was the story.
Okay, so the magic number seems to be somewhere around 10,000 hours. But wait a minute, this brings up a pretty obvious question, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Most of us have spent thousands of hours driving a car or doing our jobs, but we don't all turn into Formula 1 drivers or the best in our field. Why is that? Well, it turns out not all practice is the same. Just doing something a lot isn't enough.
There's a huge difference between 2 types of practice. First, there's what you could call autopilot practice. This is when we're just going through the motions. We're staying in our comfort zone. Think about just shooting some hoops for fun. Then there's something totally different. Deliberate practice. This is focused, it's structured, and it's designed for one reason and one reason only, to get better by zeroing in on your weaknesses.
So what does that actually mean? Well, the key to deliberate practice is that you are constantly pushing yourself right to the edge of your abilities, just outside your comfort zone.
You're actively trying to do things you can't quite do yet, you're laser-focused, and you're getting feedback so you can adjust and try again.
And this is where the magic happens. This quote just nails it. Real excellence isn't built by avoiding mistakes. It's built by actively seeking out the very edge of your skills, struggling with things that make you fail, and then learning from those failures. Over and over and over again.
Now, this all sounds great in theory. But let's be honest, deliberate practice sounds really hard. Because it is. It's tough. It's frustrating. So what on earth gives someone the motivation to push through years of that kind of effort? The answer is all in your head.
According to the work of Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck, we tend to lean towards one of two basic mindsets. Someone with a fixed mindset believes their talents are just fixed traits. You either have it or you don't. So they avoid challenges because failing would feel like a judgment on who they are. But someone with a growth mindset believes that abilities can be built. For them, challenges aren't threats, they're opportunities. And effort isn't a sign of weakness, it's the only way to get better.
And right here, this is where it all connects. A growth mindset is the psychological engine that powers deliberate practice. Think about it. If you don't truly believe that all that hard work will actually make you better, why would you ever put yourself through it? The belief that you can improve is what gives you the courage to embrace the struggle.
So when you put it all together, the path becomes surprisingly clear. It starts with a belief, the growth mindset. That belief fuels the action, the deliberate practice. You keep going, racking up the hours, learning from your failures, and in the end, you build the very thing that other people will look at and call talent.
This is such an empowering idea when you really think about it. It means that genius isn't some magical prize that only a few people get at birth. It's a structure. It's something you can build for yourself, one focused, deliberate hour at a time.
And that leaves us with one last thought. The recipe isn't a secret anymore. The blueprint is right here in front of you. So the only question left is, what are you capable of building?